Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Edinburgh International Book Festival and to Story Shop 2016 here in the Spiegel tent. My name is Rebecca and I work with the City of Literature Trust. In 2004, Edinburgh was designated the first city of literature by UNESCO World Heritage, and ever since then the Trust has been working devotedly to not only promote literature in all its many forms within the city, but to discover and nurture new and emerging writers, which is why we're here today. And today we will be hearing from Siobhan Shields. Siobhan is a writer and filmmaker currently living in Edinburgh. She is a finalist in the Twin Peaks Short Film Contest 2016 for her film Diane, and her short story shop entry, Sadie and the Bomb, is based on the experiences of her paternal grandmother during the Belfast Blitz of the Second World War. So will everybody please join me in welcoming Siobhan to the stage, please.
Sadie and the Bomb. Sadie was at the bottom of her staircase, one arm cradling baby Sam, the other reached out to turn off the hall light, when the bomb landed in the back garden. She had paused for a split second, her memory clicking in as she touched the switch, remembering the first time she had encountered electric light. With her father in the British Army, Sadie had spent her earliest years in India, sleeping under a mosquito net, thinking nothing of the small cups of paraffin guarding the feet of the bed, keeping the scorpions away. In the morning, the sun would stream through the net, the shadows marking her skin with crisscross lines. Her mama didn't like the sun and always had a tired red face, but Sadie and her wee sister Dorothy loved the brightness and the heat when they were allowed to play outside. Sadie's earliest memory was toddling towards a bright patch in the garden without her hat on, a sing-song voice in the house behind her. "Mem Sab Sadie, put on your dobie." Even more than the sun, they loved the rain in monsoon season. Sadie and Dorothy would rush outside to feel the large raindrops fall on them. They reached their arms up to the sky and would be soaked through to their skin in seconds. They danced in the rain as the dusty ground turned into mud, coating their bare feet in a red that stained their pale Irish skin. When Sadie, as a teenager, met Tommy at the Plaza Ballroom in Belfast, they would spin around the dance hall faster and faster, egging each other on, and she felt the same giddy freedom as dancing in the warm monsoon rain. The Indian servants laughed at the little memsabs and kept one eye out for their mother. The rain was so infrequent and the rest of the days so hot that when the rain did come, the worms would poke out of the earth, grateful for a drink they could guzzle through their translucent skins. They wriggled towards the sky, swaying in unison, like a field of tall grass in the wind. When Sadie was 5, and she could count her age on the fingers of a whole hand, the other soldiers started calling her Daddy Colour, which confused her. Colouring in was one of her favourites, but she'd never seen her father scribbling with crayons at the art table. One day he took her aside and showed her 3 pointed stripes on the chest of his colour sergeant's uniform and explained they would be taking a ship back to Ireland, the place where she was born but couldn't remember. The ship had electricity. Sadie and Dorothy were entranced by the magic that made the sun shine at the flick of a switch. On their first night as the magnificent RMS Magdalena was gliding across the Indian Ocean and their parents dining upstairs, Sadie and Dorothy were tucked up in bed. Across the ocean, the lookout of another ship noticed a pinprick of light that went on and off in an unusual pattern, growing larger as the smaller ship approached the bigger steamship. In the cabin, Sadie was teetering atop her father's suitcase, her small fingers clicking the light switch on and off. Dorothy hugged Tedward the bear as she watched, her mouth hanging open. Sadie snapped the switch on, off, on and off. The lookout watched the intermittent light and suspected a foreign spy might be aboard the British ship, sending messages by Morse code to an enemy vessel, probably a submarine. He quickly notified his own captain, who radioed the RMS Magdalena. They sent a team of their strongest sailors to the cabin right away. Sadie and Dorothy were shrieking with laughter, drunk on the power of controlling the sun. Sadie helped Dottie onto the suitcase and lifted her up so that she could be the controller of the sun too. When the sailors burst in, they were relieved to discover two small girls in their nightgowns rather than an enemy spy with a Luger pistol. The kitchen window shattered, shocking Sadie awake. She switched off the hall light and opened the door to the cupboard under the stairs, their makeshift bomb shelter. John and David were inside, doing as they had been told, sitting on the floor in their matching striped pajamas, their hands over their ears. The air raid siren was still wailing. The noise made Sadie's stomach queasy. She could tell from John's red face and David's wet eyes that the loud noise had scared them, but they didn't make a sound, trying to be brave for Mummy. Good boys, she cooed, but her soft voice couldn't be heard over the siren. She reached up to a space above the door and found the Cadbury's ration chocolate bar she had stashed there. John, she shouted, hold Sammy for Mummy. That's it, carefully now. David, share this with your brother. I'll be back in a minute. Their joy at getting to hold the baby and eat the chocolate was short-lived. As she shut the door, she could hear them sobbing on the other side in the darkness. When they had practiced, she was always there with them. Sadie ran down the narrow hallway and into the small kitchen, picking up the metal bucket of sand waiting by the back door. She ran out into the garden in her bare feet. The grass felt cool and wet between her toes. The bomb was an incendiary, smaller than she had imagined, but fizzing with light designed to show the Luftwaffe pilots where to drop the bigger, high-explosive bombs. Sadie was cold in the sharp night air, but she could feel the heat of the bomb on her chest like a heavy weight. Hot sparks sprang up and nipped at her bare face. For a moment, Sadie was transfixed by the pure, clean beauty of the whiteness at the centre of the bomb, and it in turn imprinted its shape onto the retina of her eye. The power of the thing held everything still, and her tiny garden looked alien to her in the brightness as the bomb blazed. There was an acrid smell of burning like bonfires, but with an electrical edge that felt dangerous. This pretty wee bomb was a marker that could bring another plummeting from the dark sky that would land on her house and destroy everything. She thought of her children, their bodies torn apart by metal and fire. Terror rose up through her throat, her whole body shaking with rage at the evil thing. I have to kill it. She took the cold, heavy bucket, one hand on the base, the other clutching the rim, and threw it forward so the sand landed with a dull thud onto the bomb. She ran back to the house, finding another bucket by the back door. The incendiary was spluttering. Sadie tipped the other bucket of sand over it, and the bomb gave out a low, guttural gasp. Tendrils of grey smoke rose from the mound of sand. She stood there counting in her head until she was sure that it was truly dead. 1 elephant, 2 elephant, 3 elephant, 4 elephant. While she counted elephants, Sadie thought of Sheila, the elephant that lived in the basement garden at number 52, next door to her sister Dorothy. The Royal Ulster Constabulary had been ordered to shoot the animals in the zoo in case they escaped in the chaos of the bombing. Mrs. Austin, who lived at 52, was a zookeeper. She raged at a government that had done little to prepare its citizens for bombing, except for destroying their beautiful animals. She couldn't bear the thought of the baby elephant scared and alone as the Luftwaffe droned in the sky, so she brought her home and sang into Sheila's large ears to comfort her while the planes dropped bombs overhead. If we go together, she said to Dorothy, as they shared a cup of tea in the small walled garden, Sheila lying by their feet in a patch of sun. Maybe she could take the boys to visit, Sadie thought, try and replace their nightmare memories of tonight with the wonder of a real live baby elephant. Then her neighbour, Mrs. Adair, was running through the side gate, a bucket in her hands. Sadie, she wheezed. Don't worry, Maggie, it's out already. Thank God, Maggie exclaimed. Dead on, love. We heard the shrieking of it from across the street, like a banshee. Mr. Adair soiled himself to age it. What? God, the squitters! Right there and then, in his good trousers, on my brand new sofa. If the bombs don't kill him, then I just might. He thought he was going to die, Sadie said. I bet your weans had more sense about them. It was only later, when Sadie was sitting cross-legged in the cupboard under the stairs, children all piled in her lap asleep, that she began to laugh. She was still laughing when Tommy came home from his air raid warden shift, ashen-faced, expecting the worst. The next day, instead of visiting Sheila the elephant, Sadie and the children were on the bus to carry Duff to her father's house, away from Belfast in case of more bombs. Tommy was at the station to wave them off, taking a brief break from his day job as a printer. Sadie stepped onto the open platform at the back of the bus. Tommy handed the baby up to her. As she leant over to grasp him, the words came out without her realising, until they were there between them. Come with us. I wish I could, Tommy replied. John and David waved from the window in the back of the top deck, the only seats left on the crowded bus. David already wiping his nose in the condensation. Sadie expertly climbed the stairs one-handed as Sammy began to cry. The conductor gave out a final, unintelligible yelp. The bus pulled out of the station in a big curve. Tommy watched until they were a tiny speck in the distance. At her father's house, Sadie lay on the single bed in the spare room. Baby Sam lay next to her on the bed, fast asleep. David and John, sensing something wrong, played quietly at her feet until they too clutched at her and slept. Sadie could not. She tried to picture her Tommy, who she had not seen for over a month. She had gone up to him in the dance hall that first night they met, as part of a bet with her friend. He was so handsome that all the girls wanted to dance with him. They sat in their chairs and gazed longingly, hoping he would take the hint, but he never did. Sadie marched up to him and shook his hand. He laughed, and they danced together the rest of the night. The other girls considered her lucky to get such a catch. That morning, the postman had described the blitz the night before in the centre of Belfast. All dead, he had said. The words rang in Sadie's head. All dead. She wandered the rooms of the small farmhouse, unsure of what to do, her face red raw from crying, snot and tears dripping from the end of her nose. She had only managed to compose herself when her father pointed out she was scaring the children. She lay still on the narrow bed and thought of Tommy. They were on the brink of marriage when his father died. He had come to her with a pain-grey face and said that he couldn't marry her yet. He needed to bring up his brothers and sisters, help his grief-stricken mother. He loved Sadie and hoped she would wait for him, but he understood if she could not. She waited. She was considered an old bride at 25, but she didn't care. She knew she wasn't a beauty, but on that day she felt wonderful with Tommy by her side. For a wedding present, they received a tandem and spent their honeymoon gliding along the County Down coast. It took her a whole week to persuade Tommy to look up and enjoy the view. As a racing bike hobbyist, he was always hunched over, trying to go as fast as possible. Her wedding present to him was a clip-on dynamo that strapped onto the bike frame and used a combination of electricity and the friction of the wheel to generate light. She had taken on secret sewing work to save up for it. When she gave the light to him, she knew he was pleased, as he spent the rest of the night talking about the inner workings of the gadget. Sadie preferred to think of the light as magic, but she was happy to listen as Tommy prattled excitedly about magnets around coils. The thought that he was dead sat like a glass bowl in the cavity of her chest where her heart used to be. She tried not to cry, for the movement would wake the children. The adult world had hurt them so much already. She poured all her grief into her glass heart. It filled with the sour grey smoke of an incendiary bomb. She struggled to hold it in her chest, to stop it from shattering into a million pieces, shards of glass piercing everything. She heard a shout from downstairs. Her father had stood at the garden gate all day, waiting for any news. "Sadie!" The baby started crying. She scooped all the children up and made her way as fast as she could downstairs. The old man must be mad. Outside, her father was hopping from foot to foot, a strange grin on his face. "I saw him. I saw Tommy." Her glass heart lurched. "Don't joke with me, Dad." Her eyes scanned the road. It was straight, but not flat, a recurring pattern of hills and then dips. She wiped her snotty nose on her sleeve. Sammy vibrated in her arms as he cried, sawing on her last nerve. The other children hanging on her legs, tired and afraid. Then she saw him, a pinprick of light in the distance at the top of the hill, like someone holding a mirror to catch the last rays of the setting sun to send a message by Morse code. Her knees went wobbly as she realised it could be anyone. And when she looked up, the light had vanished again. She held her breath and waited to see if it would reach the top of the next hill. It's him, her father shouted, pointing into the distance. Sadie wondered if they had collectively willed this apparition into existence just by wanting it to be true, and by the time it reached them, it would just be a ghost cycling past or a black flock of birds swarming low to the ground. Every time she saw it, she would look for distinguishing features, something she would know in her poor, cracked heart was Tommy, but every time she thought she had the truth of him, it disappeared again, down into the curve of the hill. She strained her eyes against the dusk to keep the pinprick of light in the centre of her vision, on at the top of the hill, off while hidden at the bottom, on, off, on and off. The children had grown quiet, confused that they were allowed outside when it was getting dark. Even her father was silent, as if his initial excitement had turned to doubt. They waited. And then there he was, hunched over the handlebars in a way that she knew was Tommy in his racing mode. The dynamo light on his handlebars flickered, growing steadily brighter as he spun the wheels. Sadie felt her face hot and crimson from crying, her flesh and blood heart beating in her chest. Tommy cycled faster towards them, his smile growing as bright as the light as he pedalled, for Sadie's red, puffy, beautiful face was a beacon to guide him home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. That was brilliant. Now, tomorrow, sadly, is the final day of Story Shop and the Book Festival, but we will be hearing from our Story Shop writer, Nandini Sen, and hopefully you all enjoy the rest of the festival. So thank you so much for coming today.